Okay, folks, how you guys doing? My name's Mark, and this is Why I Hate the World, What's Happening. Says that we're live and that there's two watching. So, hi guys. Yeah, it looks like you can hear everything. Let me just make sure
folks,
that,
how you guys doing?
if you can hear my
My
computer
name's
there.
Mark, and this is
Okay.
Why I Hate the World. What's happening?
Looks good. Hey, so if anything goes funky, please let me know because I had to stop and restart the stream because my computer just decided to go crazy on me. I don't know why. As far as I can tell, it looks like everything's streaming okay though, and we can hear everything and you know all that stuff. So that's good. Anyhow, so yeah, where were we? Okay, so before the whole thing just died and I had to start over, we were going to talk about this thing here called basically the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or CHAZ, or known as CHOP. Capitol Hill Organized Protest, I think they renamed it too. Or Free Capitol Hill. Basically, what is that? So it's an area inside of Seattle, this sort of 6-block area in downtown Seattle, which is a very bohemian area that basically is like a center of kind of like a oh shit, wrong layer. Backwards, okay. It's kind of like a center of like homosexual culture, kind of sort of. Think of it as like West Hollywood, kind of sort of, or Haight-Ashbury Street, that kind of thing, Lots of you know, uh, that sort of stuff down in that area, right? And basically, what it is after the protests, they a group of people decided they were going to block this area off and not allow any police in there, you know. And the right wing went a little completely nuts over this, just bananas, right? And there's been lots of misinformation about who these people are and what it's all about, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So really, what's happening is it's basically like an artist collective, essentially. That's sort of what it looks like. There's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of people saying that it's like just crime is rampant and there's drugs all over the place, and people are getting robbed and stabbed and shot, and there has been some violence which has led the city to close it down. And apparently, from what I've been able to tell, the organizers of the protest have decided to peacefully close down because there have been a number of people who have shot and one person actually died. I think it's only been one person as far as I can tell. But so that's really sad, right? And so what actually happened, right? So basically, this area, this sort of bohemian area, was blocked off. They decided they weren't going to allow any cops in there, right? And it reminded me a lot of, just looking at videos of it and reading about it, that kind of thing, reminded me a lot of Occupy Wall Street. If you think back to 2008, the Occupy Wall Street thing that was happening, 2009 was it? They just sort of created their own little village, and decided that, okay, we're gonna sort of live here and protest and all this stuff, and we're gonna handle things ourselves and try to be autonomous, right? And it seems like it's the same thing, except they had armed guards and didn't want police in there. So one of the bits of misinformation you're seeing is that there's a warlord that's controlling it. That's how the right-wing media has framed it. Say, this guy, his name is Raz Simone, and they say that he's a rapper and he's like this fucking gang leader and shit like that. And Fox News called him a warlord. The guy's not a fucking warlord, okay? And what do they base that on? Well, there was a video of this guy, Raz Simone, handing out guns to people, right? that he posted himself onto like a Facebook live stream, of him like basically, right? Fox News takes that and calls the guy a warlord. Well, in real life, what it is he's a rapper, a SoundCloud rapper, okay, who has a studio down there. He's apparently pretty successful. In fact, the city of Seattle gave him like a $80,000 grant or something like that, so that he could create some sound studios down in this area and kind of invest in the community, right? So he's like an activist kind of guy, As far as I know, the dude's not a drug dealer or any shit like that, right? And he was one of the organizers of this protest, of this autonomous zone, And basically, the story behind him giving away guns to people is that it was right after a guy went and, I don't know if you remember, but there was a shooting in Seattle a little while ago during the George Floyd protests, right? And what happened was that, in fact, I got it written down right here. Basically, a dude was, in fact, you know what? I'm just going to open up now that my browser fucking works again. Here's the story right here. Come on, open up. Let's see. It should be opening. I hope it's opening. Let me see here. There we go. Okay. So here's this story. So this happens, right here. And what happened was that during the George Floyd protests in Seattle, the guy in this car right here, this is, basically a gunman at Seattle protest claims he feared for his life. Others paint a different picture, right? I'll put the links to all this stuff in the thing. So what happened is this guy in this car, this black car, kind of went through the barricades and was speeding towards the crowd, right? And people in the crowd were a little freaked out and thought that he was going to run everybody over. So the guy stops. Some people went up to him and, they were pretty pissed off because it looked like he was threatening the crowd. And they, were going to go up to like fucking, I guess, fight him or something. And the driver of this car shot somebody. Basically pulled out his pistol, shot a guy in the arm. And then he ran off to and turned himself into the cops immediately, right? And I didn't really comment on this because first off, nobody died. So it's like, okay, that's good. But secondly, it seemed to me that the driver of this car, he didn't really look like, a crazy person or right-wing supremacist or anything like that. He didn't really look like he was looking for trouble. It looked to me like the guy picked and then didn't know where he was going and maybe did something really stupid. And it looked to me that he didn't look like he was trying to kill anybody, but I don't know. I mean, maybe he was, right? The fact that he ran straight to the cops right afterwards, turned himself and said, hey, I shot somebody, tells me that he wasn't there to murder a bunch of people in his car, wasn't there to run a bunch of people over. Right. But anyway, so this is the event that happens, that the next day, right, after that happens, this guy, Raz Simone, decides that he's going to, be in charge of security because in this autonomous zone, there weren't any police there. They basically weren't allowing the police to come in, right? And so he goes, okay, well, there's no cops. We got to be able to defend ourselves. Now, normally that's a thing that right-wing people are very, down with. They're very much in support of that, usually, aren't they? I mean, isn't that the kind of thing, it kind of sounds to me like, if you remember the Bundy Ranch protests, right? When a few years ago, I don't know if you guys don't know what that is, basically a few years ago, there was this rancher out in Montana or some shit, I can't remember exactly where, that took over this federal building with a bunch of his friends, and they were all armed to the teeth, and were successfully kept the cops out of there for, kept the police and the FBI out of there for a month, I think, until finally the whole thing ended in a shootout. I don't know if you remember that shit. That's, it seems to me like this is just the left-wing equivalent of that. And those guys were armed to the fucking teeth also. The Bundy Ranch people. Seemed to me that, when that happened, a lot of conservatives and shit like that didn't really have much problem with those guys carrying lethal weapons and taking over government property, right? But, you know, when the leftists do it, they go nuts. So that's one thing, right? Um, Now, why didn't I, you know, I haven't really focused on this or covered this, you know, in any of my streams because, to be honest, that this is not really my thing. I don't really support this kind of action because it doesn't do anything. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's basically just an experiment, is what it is. These people, they're anarchists, is what they are, you know. And by the very nature of their organization, they don't have leaders. Not really. They might have people who are in charge of one thing or another, but they don't believe in the same kind of hierarchical leadership that, you know, other political groups do. I mean, they're anarchists. They don't believe in hierarchies in general, right? You know, that was, and I really think that that kind of structure is one of the reasons why Occupy Wall Street was ineffective. You know, you sort of need a hierarchy in order for people, just for people to just deal with you. You know what I mean? Like how are you gonna, you need people to represent you. You know, even if that person who looks like they're in charge isn't really in charge, you should still, you know, especially if you're doing a protest and you're like, you know, a protest where you want demands to be fulfilled, where you're trying to change things, you should elect somebody to be the figurehead, somebody to be the you know, somebody to go out there and get on camera and speak for everybody else, you know. I really think that these movements tend to fail because they purposely try to avoid that, you know, and that's kind of what happened here. You know, nobody was in charge of this, apparently. You know, there was just, you know, when you rule by committee, nothing ever gets done. And sometimes it's better, I think. It's more efficient, it's better, and it's, you know, to like get somebody as authority in order to make decisions, right? But that's not, you know, that's like the antithesis of what, you know, anarchist thought is all about. I mean, I don't even really know what this particular brand of anarchism, I think it was like arachno-syndicalism or some shit like that. I don't know. There's like 50 different brands of anarchists that they're as bad as libertarians sometimes, as how they have like little subdivisions to their movements and shit like that. And, you know, 17,000 different types of philosophies and shit that all roll up into the term anarchism, right? So, you know, anyway, getting back to, yeah, that's kind of like, it's not really something that I personally believe in, right? So that's why I didn't really, you know, make a big deal out of this when it happened, because I pretty much knew this was what was going to happen. You know, it'd hang around for a few weeks and then, you know, some shit would happen and then it would close up, right? I do, however, really like the do-it-yourself kind of mentality that these people have. You know, their willingness to go out and you know, do these things without, you know, to try to create their own alternative to, you know, mainstream society, I guess, right? Let me just check one thing here, guys.
So that's one thing.
All right, just want to make sure it's still streaming, because YouTube is giving me weird-ass errors, and I don't know why, because it looks like the shit's streaming fine. So I think my computer is still fucked up, but whatever. I really do like their willingness, their ability to try and separate themselves from the mainstream and, you know, try to create alternative living styles. You know what I mean? And I really think that if mankind is going to succeed, you know, if mankind is going to get through the 21st century, we're going to have to adopt stuff like that. We're going to have to, our society is going to have to evolve past disposable, you know, consumerism, right? And this economic system we have that doesn't help everybody, you know. And these are things like, how do you have, you know, an economic system that helps everyone and also doesn't pollute the shit out of the planet at the same time? You know, maybe something, a structure like these people are proposing, you know, maybe that's partially the end. Who knows, right? So, I mean, I'm a big believer myself in just, if you want to do something, then just do it. So, if you got a bunch of friends, like, for example, in this 6 block area, of CHOP or CHAZ or whatever, I'm just going to call it CHOP because that's the, Capitol Hill Organized Protest. That's the final name they settled on, right? Apparently there was no money allowed in this area. And I'm all, that's fine. You want to try to create a society that doesn't use money, right? Then go for it. And you're going to run into some problems. And I think that maybe little experimental, you know, gigs like this, right, might be a good sort of laboratory to kind of explore, like, how do you get around those problems. Think about, how do you run a society without money? Right. Well, you have limited resources. Right. So it's easy if you have a magic machine like in Star Trek that can create all your food and clothes for you. Right. Then really you don't really need money that much. You might need it for other things. Right. So how do you create a society that is productive and provides for the needs of its people, and without having any form of money or currency or exchange? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's a question that these guys need to solve. And that's one of the reasons I think why these things never get very far, because they don't try to address those questions. They just sort of, like, people donate their time. Well, there's only so much you can donate until you got to pay the bills, you know. And it's like, it's one of those things where if everybody agrees we're not surrounding its compound or some shit, you know, ready to, like, go out and slaughter villages and stuff on his fucking command. That's what it sounds like. It's like, no, the guy was not a fucking warlord. He's, a businessman, basically, a rapper businessman, right? And in this area, basically, they're basing that on a video of him handing out weapons to somebody, and like I said, it was like, the reason they were giving out weapons is because there was some dude got shot, so it's like, it has nothing to do with, like, fucking, I mean, if you listen to, like, the right wing and people like Tim Pool, right, that was something that this is where this came from. Tim Pool, if you don't know who Tim Pool is, he's basically a fucking, essentially a fake news peddler is what Tim Pool is. He's one of these guys, like, he's sort of like Dave Rubin. He tries to bullshit people into thinking that he's a liberal, when in real life he caters to the alt-right, essentially. Even though I don't think the guy's a white supremacist, but he definitely knows where his fucking bread is buttered. Tim Pool, he's kind of this sort of provocateur sort of guy that, he'll play a video and then cut it in such a way as to make, the progressives and stuff like that look bad. Basically a fucking fool is what he is. I don't know. Tim Pool's kind of a thing. And he's very, very successful on YouTube. That's another thing. Tim Pool has, like, like Dave Rubin kind of numbers. The guy puts out a video and it makes, like, it gets like fucking 5 million views and shit. And that's what's really so bad about it. Like, it's basically Tim Pool. All he really does is he just sort of reads articles and, like, comments over it. And then he'll go out in the street once in a while or post a video or something. And it's like, nah. Anyway, fuck Tim Pool. Where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, that's all bullshit. So why did it get shut down? Why did CHOP get shut down? It's because so far there's been 4 people who have been shot. Lots of violence. And, a guy actually got murdered there, unfortunately. And they've agreed that their own security can't keep people safe. Right. So, hang on a second. I'll get my water, because it is hot as fuck here. And I don't know why. It's only this room gets hot. The rest of my house is all nice and cool and everything. It's probably because I have the window closed. If I had the window open, there'd be all these trucks and shit driving by and make all this noise. Anyway. So, oh, shit. What were we talking about? Oh, yeah. So, basically, yeah. 4 people have been killed, right? Now, one guy who was actually shot has blamed this, said he was attacked because of his race, right? And that's certainly, you know, because when you hear these stories about, okay, people getting shot in the chop zone, right? No, they never actually say who the perpetrators are, because so far nobody's has been caught, you know. There hasn't been any, none of these have been on video. No one's been caught. There's no suspects or whatever. And one of the guys who was shot and lived said that he was attacked by like basically right winger sort of Proud Boy type guys, right? And you know, I believe him because we have video of these Proud Boy type dudes running around and patrolling the outside of this zone and beating people up and shit like that. So here's one of the here's a thing that, you know, let me just go here. Man critically injured in chop shooting says he was the victim of a racial attack. So this is Kiro 7, and I'll put the links to all of this down below. And basically, so one guy's been killed, three others have been wounded, right? This guy who was wounded, basically, where was the part? Let's see. So he said, I'm not sure if they're Proud Boys or KKK, but the verbiage that they said was hold this, you know, N-word, and shot me. You know, they stood over on top of me, continued to fire. I tried to protect myself, got shot in the arm, and they got away. You know, and so, yeah, that's according to one of the victims who was killed, or shot, right? Now, here's the thing that we got here. Like, we actually have video. Let me pull it up, right? I actually have video of these types of, like, you know, Proud Boy type dudes going around assaulting people, beating them up, shit like that. Here's one outside of, let me see, let me just go over here. Let me go over to my thingamajig. I've got this all saved on, I have this saved on Reddit, actually. And go to saved. Here we go. So this one is a video here. This is on Reddit. Tiny Tose. Proud Boy brawler from Oregon on probation for multiple violent assaults, along with several Proud Boys armed with pistols, beat a man outside of the Chop today in Seattle as he asked for his phone back, which they smashed on the ground. So basically, this guy was walking up, saw a bunch of these Proud Boy dudes doing something, pulled out his phone, kind of walked by, and they went up, kicked his ass, and in this video you'll see him smashing the phone. So I don't have any audio here. He's walking up here all the Proud Boys, right? They're beating him up, his phone fell down, okay? They're throwing it around like that. This piece of shit picks it up, smashes it on the ground, you know. You can see the victim here, he's bleeding and stuff like that. To see this guy right here? This guy's got a gun right there, right? These are the guys walking around Chop here, you know, fucking like brown shirt Nazis, punching the dude in the head, stuff like that. Okay. Yeah. Alright, so if you don't know who the Proud Boys are, they're basically they're essentially brown shirts, is what they are. They claim to be you know, that's pretty much it. Like, I think you see them, like, yeah, now they got sticks and all that, they're gonna, like, kick his ass, whatever. Smashed his phone. I guess they didn't know this other guy was recording. Right. But if you don't know who Proud Boys are, they're basically they claim to be a fraternity, you know, a male-oriented fraternity run by a guy named, well, formally run. I guess they were created by a guy named Gavin McGinnis, who was, you know, basically an incel. we can make a whole video about Gavin McGinnis, but Gavin McGinnis was a guy that formerly worked for Vice, I think, and left early, whereas the other people who founded Vice went on to, like, cash in and make millions and millions of dollars, and Gavin McGinnis, like, left too early and didn't get any money, and then has gone on to, like, start this fucking right-wing hate group, and then he tried to, like, distance himself from the Proud Boys when he found out that they were going around beating people up and shit like that, you know, so he claims that he's not affiliated with them anymore, but I don't know, he is kind of, sort of, but isn't, but is, but we don't really know. So yeah, they're still around, and the Proud Boys make it you know, part of their thing is, you know, defending Western civilization and shit like that, right? they're not so much a white supremacist group as they are a misogynist sort of group, right? But it's like, so they do have members who are not, who are non-white in their group, right? But yeah, they really do align very well with, the alt-right. So they're basically what you would call alt-light, is what they call them. You know what I mean? And it's not so much about race, but it kind of is, sort of, but not really, but mostly is, you know? So, yeah, they're pretty fucking vile. And one of their things is, you have to go beat up a fucking leftist or whatever in order to join their group or, as part of their fucking initiation or some shit like that. So they're basically pieces of shit, is what they are. And it's pretty frightening to see them armed with guns that they basically could have shot this guy anytime they wanted to. And that makes it super scary because really it's only a matter of time before one of these dudes just fucking loses his mind, goes to a protest with a fucking pistol or a rifle and just unloads into the crowd. You know, you don't think that'll happen? I'm surprised it hasn't happened so far. I think we've come pretty close to it happening. You're starting to get reports of right-wingers showing up armed at these things. And like we did in one of the prior streams, I showed one where a guy just took a gun out and just showed it to the crowd and threatening people, and then, we're having these shootings like this. So, here's the thing about this. So, those 4 people, there's no suspects right now as to who any of the perpetrators are who shot these 4 guys. One of the guys says that he was attacked by dudes like that. Whether they were Proud Boys or not, he couldn't say. And you can't really blame the guy for not knowing. I mean, he's fucking just, can you positively ID a bunch of dudes that come up and beat the shit out of you and then shoot you and then leave? Like, how do you know what group they're with? Right. That's the scary fucking thing. But we know those guys are out there. So, that kind of makes me a little freaked, and it also makes me like, not surprised that the people in this chop zone would want to be armed, especially if they're trying to do this without having cops come in there. Like, the whole idea behind this was to run their little sort of collective society without the interference of police in the first place, so they have to be able to defend themselves. And this is really why all of this shit is a bad idea. You know what I mean? Because people get caught in the crossfire. Right. There's another video I had, and I can't find the link to it anymore. There was another video of a guy that went down to this CHUDS thing. Now, I've been much in support of these people so far in this live stream, right? Now I'm going to say something that's a little bit against them. So, but hear me out. All right. The reason why it's not a good thing to have citizen patrol type, groups like that is because, people who are not trained should not be trying to enforce the law. Okay. So what do I mean by that? Well, and this goes for, left-wing people, right-wing people, whatever. This is why you don't want private security. Right. Especially when it's private security where it's just some yahoo with a gun that you just gave them. Whether that's a right-wing guy or a left-wing guy or whatever. It doesn't matter what your politics are. You shouldn't just give random fucking people weapons and tell them to go keep the peace. Okay? And here's why. Because you don't always people don't agree what the law is, right? So one of the things in this chop zone, for example, is that they don't want pictures in a certain area, right? Well, there's no law against taking pictures. And if you want to go take pictures someplace, you should be allowed to take pictures there unless there's a law that says no pictures. So just because a bunch of people don't want you to take pictures, you know what I mean? Like, since when do you have to listen to what just some random fucking yahoo on the street tells you to do? You don't. If you're out on the street, some guy comes up and says, "This is my building. I don't want you taking pictures of it." If you're on the sidewalk, you can tell him to go shut up, fucking piss up a rope because you're on public property and it's a free country, and unless there's a sign or a law that says no photos, violators will be fined or some shit like that. Unless there's something like that saying that you're not allowed to do it by law, you're allowed to do it. Well, I had a video here of a guy that was walking around. He was like a YouTuber walking around the chop zone, interviewing people, stuff like that. And then he walked into the area where they don't want you to take pictures, right? And a guy with a rifle started following him, and it was just like, what are you doing? Why are you following me? The dude wouldn't talk to him, So he tried to talk to him, and then the guy just said, I'm just making sure you're not doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, And then he wouldn't talk to him, and the dude got freaked. And he's like, is this guy gonna follow me? Is he gonna shoot me? You don't know. Because here's the thing. This dude is not this dude is a security guy. He's not a cop, right? So he's not trained on what the laws are, right? He doesn't have authority to execute any laws to begin with. And you shouldn't have to do what he says. You know what I'm saying here? Like, you get where I'm going. And even if even if, for example, you are in that zone and you're doing something they don't like, is the thing that you're doing against the law, right? Let's say that you were talking to somebody that they don't want you to talk to, taking a picture of a building they don't want you to take a picture to. What are they going to do about it, right? Are they going to shoot you? Right? So who says they're allowed to shoot you for shit that, see what I'm saying here? That's why, vigilantes are not allowed in the country, because, the people that enforce the law have to be, this is what the whole protest is all about. The people who have the right authority, the people who enforce the law should have the correct authority in order to enforce the law, right? How do they get the authority? Through the mandate of the people, right? And this just happens to be the kind of thing that anarchists don't believe in. They don't believe in any of that. So it all comes down to, I have a gun, you're going to do what I say. That's basically it. And that's what's wrong with that kind of thing. It's wrong also from a right-wing perspective too. You shouldn't have to listen to just what some asshole tells you on the street, regardless of who he is, even if he does have a gun. But, if he's got a rifle pointed at you, you're going to do what he fucking says. And that's the shitty thing about all of this. It's very like, normal, ordinary people get caught up in stuff like this. Let's imagine that you owned a house in that 6 square blocks, right? Let's imagine that you live there and you come home from work one day, all this protests and shit are going on, right? You're doing your best to just live your life and stay out of it, whatever, right? Then you come home and then there's like a fucking big ass block, concrete block in front of the street, and you can't drive your car to your house anymore. Bunch of anarchists have basically taken over your fucking neighborhood. What are you going to do about it? You can't get to your own property. You own that place. You live there, right? It's yours. They've decided that they're just going to take this area. Do you give it to them? Are you obligated to give it to them? Why? These are the things that, when we talk about leftists, see, when conservatives say the word leftist, they don't know what they're talking about. Okay. To a conservative, everybody left of them is a leftist. So they group Democrats and centrists, right? And progressives and all those people and communists all together in one big ass group, right? Nothing could be further from the truth. The people, the real leftists out there, they hate Democrats more than they hate conservatives. They hate people like me, right? People like me who try to be peaceful about this shit and don't immediately buy into their rhetoric. They hate people like me even more than they hate the racists and the CHUDS. That's what they call them, CHUDS. That's why I use the word CHUD in this stream. they really fucking hate, they really hate centrists, people like me, more than anything else, because they think that people like me hold everybody back. That's the idea. And yeah, well, maybe we do, but for example, I'm not gonna like commit to anything until I get some real solutions. And this is why, none of these people so far have ever been able to demonstrate to me any real solutions to the, many, many problems they pull that come up when they try to like fucking, you know, when they try to reinvent society and smash capitalism and all that shit. And it's like, I'm all for it. Let's do it. Tell me how you're going to do it. Show me how you're going to do it without killing people, right? Without killing people and without stealing things from people and without making everybody's quality of life 10 times worse than what it is right now. And I'll be on board. But they can't, because there's flaws in these philosophies. I don't know. We can go into that a little bit more. I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here. I didn't really come here to talk about the flaws in communism or Marxist theory or whatever, right? I mean, maybe we can make a video about that one of these days. Because that's another thing. I mean, just because I'm a progressive, because I have progressive ideals, or rather, I want to see progressive outcomes politically in the country. That doesn't make me a communist. I'm not a communist. No, I'm not a communist. I'm not an anarchist, right? I'm not a Marxist. I'm not any of that shit. I'm pragmatic. I believe in things that you can show me, especially when it comes to politics. I don't care about your philosophy, me personally. I don't care what you believe. I just want to see the practical effects in people's lives. How is this going to help people? And if I can't, if you don't have a plan on how you're going to like institute your like, Marxist paradise or whatever, right? Without fucking re-education camps or without like, immensely reducing the quality of life or having an armed revolution or some shit like that, then sorry, I'm not going to be on board with it myself. But anyway, that's just me. Getting back to this, let's see, CHOP. Yeah, so that's basically what's going on with CHOP. It's kind of, things like these, they're experiments, and I support them, but it's just kind of like, I don't know, I really think the reason they fail is because they're too ambitious, and the people that try to implement them are too idealistic. And when I say too idealistic, they don't understand how the real world works, Like, okay, so for example, one of the things that these guys were talking about is they didn't want to have any money in there, right? And you think, okay, the perfect society, the perfect kind of leftist, super, socialist society wouldn't have money. People point to things like Star Trek, right? As a kind of, idealized society, like that, in fiction, right? And you go, well, how are you going to get there? How are you going to get to a point where, the means of production are owned by the collective mass of people, right? And run in a democratic way, where people are not exploited, right? And all of that shit. How are you going to get from what we have now to that without death and destruction? And, or even, how? Like, nobody ever has an answer. Like, these guys don't have answers to those types of questions. How are you going to implement it? Let's say tomorrow, your socialist candidate wins the election, becomes president, right? How is he going to implement these things? Let's say fucking Bernie Ocasio, Ilhan or Cortez, Omar Sanders wins the presidency tomorrow, right? And they want to abolish all money and give us unlimited free college and have a right for housing and all that stuff, right? These are all things that I would get behind in a nanosecond. If some politician came up and had a plan on how to do it, and a plan that could work, and even if it costs some money or whatever, I'd get behind it in an instant. So where's your plan? Tell me your plan. How do you do it? Um, this is kind of exasperating because a lot of these people don't believe in democracy, and especially when it comes to they don't believe in voting. They don't seem to believe in representative democracy. Not really, you know. Um, and that's another reason why they never get anywhere because their unwillingness to engage in the political process, right? So it's like you want all this shit, and then you see like a candidate like Bernie Sanders, right? And he's proposing some of the shit that you want, but they won't go vote for him. So then Bernie Sanders ends up losing the primaries or whatever because these people don't believe in voting. They don't believe in the political process. They don't believe in, and the reason why is because it's a system that, oppresses people or whatever, right? Mm. And they don't want to engage in a system that is used for oppression, right? They see that as a thing that's like, you know, um, they see that as perpetrating the system and perpetrating, exploitation and oppression and all that. It's like, well, how are you going to get what you want then? If you're not going to use the system that's there, that is designed to help you, achieve the goals that you want, how are you going to do it? Convince people? You know, how? How are you going to convince people? I mean, conceivably, you would want to pass a law. Like, let's say if you want to have free college. Conceivably, you could just pass a law that says, okay, we're going to fund college through blah, 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 and we're going to do a tax here, and we're going to do, we're going to cut defense spending there. And then before you know it, we come up with $600 billion, and that's going to go to free college, blah, 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 right? Great, fantastic. But they don't want to do it that way. They want to, like, go in and destroy the entire system of education and recreate it from the ground up, design it in such a way that it's free and access to everybody. And it's like, that'll never happen. If it's not going to happen. That's like building the Starship Enterprise to fly to the moon when all you need is the Saturn V rocket. You see what I'm saying there? It's pushing now. It's like, yeah, okay, you should, go for those ideals, obviously, right? Shoot for the moon, but in the meantime, you got to think about the actual real people out there who really, whose lives are depending on these policies that you create. In the meantime, while you're trying to like go for your perfect fucking like vision, right? Perfect socialist vision, there's other people who are suffering and struggling who could really use that free college education to like get some upward mobility in their family and get out of poverty and shit like that. You know what I mean? Like, what's your end goal here? Is your end goal to improve people's lives? Or are you just doing this because of your ideology? Right? You gotta think of it like that. There is such a thing as your ideology getting in the way sometimes. When people don't want to compromise, to get, part of what they want, right? If you don't think compromise, I mean, that's how democracy works. And it seems to me that a lot of these people just don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in it, for whatever reason. Whether they think it's because it oppresses people, or they think it's bullshit, or they think it's just, a system that's outlived its usefulness, or if it's used by if it's a tool of the fucking, I don't know, tool of the fucking capitalist class or whatever. I don't know. I'm not a Marxist. I'm also not a expert when it comes to this shit. So I don't know. I could be talking out of my ass here. Whatever. I probably am. I'm just saying it's like, that's part of the reason why these guys fail so much. And that's part of the reason why the left is so weak in this country. Right? Because we are. The left wing is weak as hell in the United States. The Democrats are essentially the junior party. Right? And you'll notice that Democrats didn't actually start winning stuff until they became kind of like Republican light in the 90s, right? With Bill Clinton. Okay. They were basically gods. Like, I don't know, a lot of the kids out there who were in these protests and on Reddit and stuff like that, if you guys, you're 20, 25, 30, you don't remember the 80s very much. You don't remember how polarized, like, you think shit's polarized now, You don't even know. Like, I remember the 1984 election. It was the very first election that I was old enough to remember. I think I was like 7 or 8, something like that. And this was Ronald Reagan getting reelected, right? And I just remember seeing the map, and the map was all one color, right? Ronald Reagan didn't just win that election, he dominated. He god stomped in that election, right? I think he won every single state. I think there may have been one state, like Massachusetts or some shit, that he didn't win. Okay. So, yeah, and whether, whatever caused that, whatever like conspiracy theory you want to believe in as to how he managed to fucking like just dominate so hard in that election. There's people out there that think that it was stolen, or there's people out there whatever. The real reason is because, whether it was a mixture of him being a celebrity or whatever, it's basically because the Republicans are powerful as hell in this country. They're extremely powerful, you know, and that's something that a lot of progressives and Democrats and progressives and stuff are in denial of. You know, they don't understand. They think that, because it's easy to see the shenanigans that people like Donald Trump or George W. Bush before him got up to, and think that they're just like the Republican Party. The conservatives in this country are just a fucking joke. It's easy to think that, you know. They're not a joke. They're extremely, I remember like after Obama won in 2012, people on the left were saying shit like, yeah, the Republicans are going to be a regional party. Right? That was the discussion. The discussion in 2012 was that Republicans were going to be a regional party. They weren't going to be a national party anymore, and that some other kind of like, political party was going to take over, maybe libertarians or some shit like that. Right. And you'd only see basically Republicans in the Deep South, and every other state was going to be like, a mix of other parties. That's what people were going. Right. Then, 2016 comes around, and not only do the Republicans win, everything, right? They got like, the Senate, and like they also had the majority, the presidency, the majority of governorships, the majority of state legislatures in the country. Basically, they fucking run the country right now. They're extremely powerful. They're extremely organized, right? They know how to get what they want. And if you're going to fight against that, then we need to do the same, right? We need to do the same. We need to stop fucking like, pussyfooting around the bush, with these stupid fucking like people that don't believe in voting and that want to like smash the system. It's like it's not going to happen. There's not going to be a communist revolution in the United States. It'll never happen. Okay. Too many of the people in the country are against it. Right. And the people that are against it in the country are armed to the teeth. It will never fucking happen. You're out of your minds. And, they like, the thing about the right wing is that they constantly fucking, fearmonger about this shit all the time. They fear that's like part of the whole thing with this autonomous zone, this chop zone. People like fucking Tim Pool, making videos and shit on Fox News and all that, saying how it's like, and then there's like guys going on Joe Rogan and all this saying how they're like fucking, there's going to be a civil war and all this crap, right? And it's going to be this communist takeover, and they're going to fucking like steal everybody's land and have all the fucking like, capitalists out in the street hanging them and shooting them and stuff like that. It's like it's bullshit. It's complete bullshit. It'll never fucking happen because the movement is made up of college kids, right, and burnt out fucking hippies that have no real plan on how they would even achieve the shit that they want. They don't have the will. First off, they don't have the numbers or the will to do a violent revolution. Forget it. These are people who are against gun ownership. They don't have guns. right? It's not going to be, so there's not going to be like, bombings and stuff like that you see in right-wing media. That's complete horseshit. It's fear-mongering, right? You know, they're disorganized, right? I mean, if you look at something like the Green Party, for example, the Green Party is probably the closest thing to an actual political party that some of these people support. Not all of them, but some of them would, right? Green Party doesn't have anything. They've been around for what, 40 years now. They've never won a governorship. They've I think they've won something like 2 or 3 state legislatures, in like California or Washington or something like that. They've never had a senator or a House member, right? What the fuck are they doing? Even the fucking Libertarian Party has managed to get a couple of governors. Gary Johnson, for example, right? That fucking pathetic group of yahoos have managed to elect some people. How come the fucking Green Party can't? And every year they get millions of dollars. That's the entire reason why the Green Party fields a presidential candidate every 4 years, right? The entire reason why they do it is so that they can get money for federal matching funds. That's what it's about. They don't actually believe that they're going to win anything. So they don't actually field a candidate with the idea that they're going to actually win the election. They're doing it basically as a publicity stunt in order to get money. That's what it's about. The Green Party is a money-making enterprise. That's what it is. That's the whole reason why Ralph Nader ran in 2000 to get federal matching funds. That's the whole reason behind Jill Stein's run in 2012. They're not, and if you look at them, they're not serious. They're not serious candidates because they're not serious people. They don't have. There's no plan about how they're going to institute any of this shit they want. It's laughable. Go on the Green Party website, look at their platform, look at the shit they want, and try to find any kind of plan. They don't have it. It's laughable bullshit. It's unrealistic. It's like they know that they have no chance of fucking winning. And I don't care if I just lost like 50 subscribers right there. I don't care. People need to, you gotta face reality, right? When it comes to these things, you have to face reality. If these are the people you support, if these are the causes you believe in, then take a look at who the people are that are running this shit, and make a hard, think really hard about, do they deserve your time and money? Because they don't. They really don't. If you really want the shit to get out there, you have to work for it. Green Party is not working for it. Right? They're working for themselves. And, like I said, even the fucking libertarians have a better track record of actually getting shit passed, of actually getting people elected, of like proposing legislation and stuff like that. And the libertarians are a fucking joke. I don't know if you've seen them lately. The guy that they ran in 2016, what the fuck was his name? I can't even remember his name. He was a fucking hit. Was it Gary Johnson in 2016? I don't know. He was a goddamn idiot. Right? They're wacky as hell, but somehow they actually have managed to win some elections now and then. It's like, I don't know. Anyway, how did we get onto that in the first place? I was talking about CHOP, but we're pretty much done with that. It's really kind of sad to see the whole CHOP thing go away, and I really hope that they do catch whoever shot those guys, right? But I guess, it kind of goes to show that it is possible, I guess, to have, I guess it shows that people want it. That's what it is, right? People really want this kind of freedom, in order to just do their own thing and not have to worry about cops murdering them for whatever reason. I mean, that's why this whole thing started to begin with. Let's not forget, it was police brutality with George Floyd and all that. So that's one thing I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about, let's see, how long have we been streaming? An hour? I wanted to talk about the demands of the protesters, because this is something that, since the riots have stopped and all that shit, then protesters, you're not really seeing a lot of coverage of these protesters, because they're still kind of going. They may have calmed down a little bit, but they're still out there, right? And you go, well, what do these people want? Because, none of the news stations actually covered, right? none of them actually covered what these people want. What are they protesting about? Right? You know, they're all there when like people are smashing windows and burning down buildings and like trashing cop cars and shit like that. But when it comes to what the people are actually asking for, they're largely silent. You know. So what do these guys want? Well, there was a thing. This is in Chattanooga, right? The protests in Chattanooga, and there were 7 demands that they wanted. And I wanted to go over those one by one. So the first one was divest. All right, so this is what, you know, basically when people say defund the police, this is what they're talking about. Okay. First demand, divest from the police department budget and reinvest into black and brown communities, right? So basically, I guess in that, you know, where George Floyd was from, I guess it was like, what, Minnesota, right? The police department budget was something like 38% of the entire city's budget or something like that. And one of their demands was, well, that would be better served instead of spending this money to police the people in this area. It would be better served to reinvest that in this area, you know, economically, right? And why would this be a thing? Well, you know, it's no secret that in this country, basically, the more poor you are, the more likely you are to live in an area that's more polluted, right? Where you live will most likely have less in the way of services, like things like clean water. You know, Flint, Michigan comes to mind, right? You'll have less in the way of commercial centers. You know, for example, one reason why African Americans in this country are disproportionately hit by things like diabetes and obesity and stuff like that is because in a lot of African American communities in this country, you can't get, you know, there aren't any grocery stores, you know. There'll be plenty of things like fast food restaurants, right? And liquor stores, that kind of thing. But if you want to get fresh vegetables, you know, like say from a Ralph's or some shit, then you end up having to go like, you know, 6, 7, 8 miles, 10, you know, out of where you live to go to the nearest grocery store because none of them will open in the neighborhood that you're in. You know, is it because it's a high crime area? It's because of the property values? I don't know. I mean, there's lots of different reasons, right? And so that's, you know, invest in the community, right? Get us clean water, get us some, you know, get us some grocery stores out here, get us some places, you know, places where people can work close by, right? Stuff like that. So you don't have to commute 3 hours to go to work. Shit like that. You know, Los Angeles has that problem a lot. You know, nobody who actually works in Los Angeles lives in Los Angeles because the rents are too high, you know? And if you work out there, traffic is so bad that you got to get out ahead of it. And let's say you got to be at work at 9 a.m. That means you're leaving your house at 7 in order to get someplace that would be like a, you know, 30-minute drive without traffic. It's really bad like that. So it's like, yeah, reinvest in your community. So that's the first thing. And another thing when they talk about, you know, defund the police, a lot of that has to do also with federal funds. In particular, defense contractors offloading military hardware to police departments. You know, you saw a lot of this after the Iraq War and Afghan War started to wind down a little bit, and a lot of these defense contractors started making things like, you know, sort of armored personnel characters for carriers for SWAT teams, that kind of thing. You started seeing shit like that. You know, police departments getting like high-powered sniper rifles that can shoot through walls, right? Night vision goggles, all this other stuff that was originally developed for military use being sold to police, right? And then what happens when they have all of this? Well, then you start seeing shit like no-knock raids, for example. You know, that was one of the things that that's another one of the demands. They want to stop no-knock raids. You know, that was the Breonna Taylor was another victim of a police shooting, who was basically, the SWAT team showed up at her house, busted down the door in a no knock raid. She stood up in her, she was sleeping, right? She like sat up in her bed and they just shot her, right? And it's like they had the wrong house. She was basically they were at the wrong place and they shot the wrong person, because of a fucking no knock raid. And that actually goes down to one of these other ones here. One of the other demands was having a verbal warning before you, use deadly force, right? That kind of goes hand in hand with the thing we just said, What they should have done, if they had their way, they'd have to knock first. That would awaken the people in the house, right? And even if they bust down the door, at least they know that they're there and the people inside the house can be ready and not panic. And, okay, we'll let you in, blah, blah, blah. We didn't do anything, whatever. Do your, come on in. We're not resisting. And that would have avoided this woman getting killed. And then, they'd have to give a verbal warning. I'm going to shoot or whatever. I don't know what you would say, drop the gun, I don't know, whatever. Some kind of verbal warning. That's another thing that a lot of these shootings could be avoided. The thing that happened to Tamir Rice, that was another one. So if you don't know Tamir Rice, he was a 12-year-old kid that had an airsoft gun. That was in this park, playing around in a park outside. And, somebody thought he was, a gangbanger with a gun, and they called the cops. Police show up, right, and blow him away within 2 seconds of arriving at the park, right? So one of my viewers here actually gave me a video here and showed me where it looked like in the video the kid put the gun in his belt like this. And as he was turning around, it looked like he was reaching for it. So the cops fired, right? Well, yeah, okay. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe they thought it was a real gun and they thought he was going to pull it out and shoot him, right? But we don't know. We don't know because he's dead. Maybe he was reaching to pull it out and was going to put it on the ground. He was a 12-year-old kid. He had no idea what to do, right? So, that's why it's like in this particular case, blaming the victim is still not a good thing. He's a kid. He has no clue. He's scared. He's got no idea what the fuck he's doing. Maybe he was going to take it out, throw it, or put it on the ground, or whatever, right? It's hard enough, if you listen, when the police come and they're screaming at you and all this shit, it's hard enough to do what they fucking say when you're an adult who's thinking clearly. I can't even imagine being 12 years old, scared out of your fucking wits, right? So, yeah, now here's the thing. That would have avoided, a verbal warning, right? Would have avoided that whole thing. Cops show up, hands in the air, we will shoot, whatever, I don't know. Then, the kid at least has a chance. And he may not have, he still may have reached for it and they still may have shot him, whatever. But at least there's a chance, Think about the 90% case of this person would be an adult, they'd be thinking clearly, right? They would see the cops would give them a warning, and they would most likely do what the cop says. And lots of lives would be saved that way. That's one of those demands, Nothing wrong with that. Another one, number 2, was institute the duty to intervene when excessive force is not used in a proper way, right? So basically, what does that mean? Well, in this George Floyd instance, the guy, the cop, I can't remember his name, but the guy that was kneeling on George Floyd's neck was basically there for 8 minutes, kneeling on this guy's neck, right? The other police officers just sort of stood around and, didn't really do anything to help. They just kind of stood there. So this would mean that, well, no, they would have to, if they see something like this happening, right, and they see a guy getting, excessive force being used in a way that is not allowed, chokehold or some shit, they would have a duty to intervene, right? You would think it would be like that already, but it's not like that already. In fact, there was a story that I saw actually on the Young Turks about a police officer who I talked about this in my live stream last week with Raf. It was a story about a police officer who responded to a call where a guy was trying to commit suicide by cop. Right. Basically, a guy had a gun that wasn't loaded and was going to the cop and saying, "Shoot me." And the cop, the police officer realized that that's what was going on. That this was a suicide thing. And he said, "No, I'm not going to shoot you." You know, and he didn't. And then other police officers came, saw the dude with a gun, and they shot him and killed him. Right. And the one guy who didn't do it ended up getting fired. And the reason he was fired is because from him not firing on this guy who was trying to commit suicide, right, by a police officer, by him not doing it, it put the other police officers in danger. Right. Now that, so think about that. That guy assessed the situation correctly. Right. Saw what was happening, assessed the situation correctly, and tried to save this person's life. And he's the one that got punished. Whereas the people who didn't, the people who showed up and just blew this dude away, right, who ended up having a gun that wasn't loaded, right, they're the ones that get rewarded. Nothing happened to them. But the guy who tried to save lives in this situation is the guy that gets fired. There's something wrong with that. Even if that is that's the procedure. Even if the procedure is, somebody that looks like they're going to threaten people or whatever, better safe than sorry, whatever, right? There's still something wrong in that with this picture. That guy shouldn't have been fired, at least. At the very least, he shouldn't have been fired. I mean, fuck, he should have been promoted, in my opinion. Right? It's like if only everybody else had the same like training and wherewithal that this dude had, then that other guy who was like trying to kill himself, trying to commit suicide might be alive today. Right? I mean, seriously. So that's that's what duty to intervene is. Completely reasonable. I don't see why that's not already a law that police officers have to follow already. I don't see why that isn't something that should be the law. Like right now there's such a thing as Good Samaritan laws in certain parts of the country, right? Where if there's a crime happening and you're a witness and you don't do anything, and it's a situation where you could have done something, you can go to jail. You can be, I don't know, like, you ever watch Seinfeld way back in the day? The very last episode of Seinfeld, they like watch this lady get like robbed or something, and they all just stand around and they laugh at it, and then they end up going to prison because of a Good Samaritan law that said, you stood around, you didn't do anything to help when you had the ability to, right? Like, you'd think, that's already a thing, so it's not like there isn't precedence for that type of thing. Right? Just apply that to police officers, right? They should, they should have to help you if they can, I don't see what's wrong with that shit. That's perfectly fucking reasonable. Let's see. Number 4 was essentially the same thing as number 1. Investing engagement of youth by the development of programs to meet responsibilities already outlined in the budget. So that was one thing. Apparently they already have like programs and laws and shit on the books in Chattanooga that are just not being funded, right? Number 5, improve public transportation, right? That includes technology, security, and access to movement for the population. So that kind of relates to the thing we were talking about before. I was talking about with traffic, shit like that. That is also about investing in communities. If people can't get to work because there's no public transportation, then that's a barrier to their economic well-being. And that's a big problem in a lot of cities in this country. A lot of cities on the East Coast have really good public transportation. Things like New York, right? You can live in New York and not have a car, and you can pretty much get anywhere you need to go in the city through the subway, right? Most of the cities in the country don't have that, you know, at all. I can tell you Los Angeles doesn't have that. Los Angeles has the shittiest public transportation system in the entire fucking country. It's buses that suck ass. They're horrible. They barely show up at all, you know, if they show up. I mean, it used to take me back in the day. I lived about 10 miles away. So when I was going to college, you know, I went to like community college, and my house was about 10 miles away from where I went to school, right? And it took me, I had to take three different buses to get there. It took 3 hours, right? Because the buses only came once an hour. So whether I walked or whether I took the bus, it still took 3 hours, right? To go like, I think it was like a little under 10 miles, maybe about, actually no, it wasn't even that much. It was more like 7 miles, you know. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous, you know. And you think about, well, shit, if that's like, you know, imagine if you had to do that for work every fucking day. You got to get up, you know, it takes you fucking 3 hours to get to work. Whereas if you had a car, it'd be a commute that's, you know, literally 10 minutes, right? And, you know, well, you think, yeah, okay, we'll get a car. Well, yeah, but, you know, the city is supposed to be doing this shit in the public's good. You know, like you want your city to be functional. And part of that is having a good public transportation system. So you don't have to have 50 million cars out on the highway, right? So that's another thing. Like Los Angeles has all this fucking traffic. It's got so much traffic that the daily, it's like the freeways come to a standstill daily in Los Angeles every single day. You know, 7 a.m. immediately, the whole freeways, everything locks up. You know, there's choke points throughout the city, right? That, and if you need to go somewhere early in the morning, you got to get out ahead of them. And it's just sort of like, that's just the daily life, the daily, like, you know, reality of living in Los Angeles, because the public transportation here is so fucking crappy that, you know, and they don't want to invest any money in it. And every year the shit comes up for like a vote, and people vote it down every fucking year, you know. And it's always the same shit over and over. We don't want to spend money on blah 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 blah. You know, the same people say the same thing. Tell them to get cars, is what they say. And it's like, well, fuck you, man. You know, tell them to get cars, you're just going to make traffic worse. You know, how about you actually get like a decent transportation system? You know, some kind of, I don't even know, what, subway, monorail, people mover, right? I don't even care at this point, you know. Catapults, just get something, you know. It's basically impossible. If you need to get downtown from where I live, not possible, you know. You'll be taking buses all day, right? And it'll take you fucking like 9 hours to do it, you know. Not possible at all. Well, that really, really, really screws up people's economic, you know, choices. It limits where you can, you know, where you can live and where you can work and all that stuff. Especially if you don't, you know, have a car, right? And you want to, like, let's say you don't have a car and you just got a really good job. And it just so happens your job is like fucking, you know, downtown, and you live out in a suburb, right? Well, you can't take that job because you can't get there if you don't have a car. So when you carpool with somebody, what if you don't have it? You know, what if you can't do it, right? But it's it fucks you up. It screws up your, you know, something. Whereas a different person, you know, who had access to transportation might be able to go take that job and earn that income. You're not going to be able to do it. You're going to have to take a shittier job that's closer by, just because that's how it works, you know. I mean, you know, you should try to arrange your city in such a way to get rid of problems like this, you know, to make it easy to move around, so that it helps, you know, and it helps the economics of your city, of your populace, right? I mean, shit. So anyway, So yeah, perfectly, that one is perfectly fucking reasonable as well. In fact, shit, we need that here. We need that in my city. Right. Um, okay, number 6 was prison reform. Free inmates convicted of nonviolent victimless crime. What do you mean by that nonviolent victimless crime? Usually, when they say things like that, it's they're referring to drug possession. But it could also mean things like prostitution, for example. You know, that kind of thing. And I can see that. In particular, I could get behind releasing people that have been, convicted of possession, right? For, yeah, like drug possession. I could get behind that because it's really doesn't hurt anybody. If you're not selling drugs, I mean, right now, marijuana is legal in California, right? People aren't going to jail for that anymore. That's fantastic. Um, I don't see why we don't extend that at least to other drugs. Like especially if it's just a possession. Why go to jail just for having shit that you're not selling? If you're just using it yourself, you're not hurting anybody. You know, you just have it on you. You shouldn't have to go to prison for that. Maybe I mean if you're selling it, that's one thing. If you're selling heroin or some shit, or crack or whatever, then yeah, that's different, right? But having a dime bag of this or that, right, for your own personal use, who cares? Who cares? Why should you go to prison for that? That should just be a ticket, if anything. Even if let's say you're not currently intoxicated, right? Why do you go to prison for just having a substance on you? What should happen? If you get caught with it, they should confiscate it. We're taking your dope. Bam. Gee, that sucks. And you know what? Here's a $50 fine. Perfectly fine. Don't do it again. Okay. If it's just like a little bit that, if you're not selling it, if you're not a drug dealer, right? Which is what they're talking about here. Me personally, like as far as when it comes to things like prostitution or whatever, um, I don't know. I mean, conceivably, I would say yes because, but at the same time, prostitution traditionally it's a way that women women are exploited. Like I think rather you should have a legalized way of people who want to like do that should have the choice to, kind of like how they have it in Las Vegas or whatever, and it should be highly highly regulated. That's what I think. If you're going to be a prostitute, then you got to sign with a brothel or whatever, and you have to be tested for STIs on a regular basis. And the place where you're working out of there has to follow certain rules so that they're not forcing people to do it, so there's no like human trafficking going on, right? None of the people that are doing it are underage, shit like that. That's what I mean, because it's like street prostitution is pretty fucking horrible, and I can't get behind even if it's just like because the counter argument to that is like, well, what about a woman that does it on her own and doesn't have a pimp and all that, and it's like, well, yeah, but there should be a legal way to do that as well, a legalized way where that situation is also regulated. You know what I mean? It's because it can lead to so many other problems, and it can lead to basically people being held against their will, and like women being addicted to drugs and then like forced to go out by pimps to like fucking you know forced to go out by pimps in order to fucking turn tricks and all of this other shit. And it can just lead to so much bad stuff that if you're gonna do it, it should be extremely regulated, is what I would say. So I don't know. Until you have that infrastructure in place, I wouldn't support legalizing prostitution myself. I could see reducing their sentences for someone who was a prostitute, right? Maybe you shouldn't have to go to prison for being a prostitute. I could get behind that. So I don't know. What else they got here? Number 7 was further police training and vetting. Right. I think we can all agree with that. Nothing wrong with that. Training the police officers to not blow people away for no reason. I mean, obviously we've got a fucking problem, right? So, yeah. One other thing that I saw that wasn't in this list that I've heard people say is they want a police database of cops who use lethal force, right? And what do you mean by that? Well, it seems like a lot of times when, say, a police officer does get in trouble for using lethal force, when it wasn't appropriate, or straight up murdering somebody and hiding behind a badge kind of thing, and it seems like even when these people do get held accountable, more often than not, they just end up getting fired. They don't actually go to prison. They don't go to jail, most of the time. So what do? They leave and then they just go get a job as a cop somewhere else. And it happens again, And that's what happened with that one guy. I don't know if you were here last week when I was with my live streaming with my friend Raph. We were talking about there was I can't remember his name, but there was a police officer. There's a video out there of a cop who was responding to a report of a guy with a gun, and it turned out the guy with the gun was an exterminator who had a pellet gun that he used to shoot rats with or whatever, right? And there's video of this guy in this hallway where the cop is his name was Philip B. His last name started with a B. Let me see if I can find this. Shooting. Let's see. Yeah, the shooting of Daniel Shaver was his name. Right. And the police officer that shot him was Philip Brazelford. And this happened in 2016. And basically what happened was they were in a hallway of a hotel, La Quinta Inn and Suites Hotel in Mesa, Arizona. And what it was I'm sure if you've seen this video, you know what I'm talking about, right? Basically, the guy, Daniel Shaver, was crawling. The cop, Philip Basilford, told him, get on the ground, crawl towards me, and was kind of an asshole about it. I will shoot you, do that again and I'll shoot you, blah, 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 right? And if you have to fall forward, you better fall forward or I'm going to shoot you. The guy was, Philip Basilford, kind of a complete asshole, making this dude crawl. So then the dude, Shaver, is crying. You hear him crying, yes, sir, don't shoot, and he's crying. And what happened is that his pants start to fall off. Right. So instead of crawling on the ground bare ass naked, he reaches back to pull his pants up, and the guy shoots him. Right? And then this dude, Basilford, didn't just have a pistol, he had a fucking rifle on him. Right. SWAT team got a rifle thing. Blows him away. Turns out he's not armed at all. Guy wasn't armed, and this is all on video on his cam. He was following instructions. Right. It wasn't a threat at all. This cop fucking murders him. Right. Nothing happened to him. Philip Basilford was fired and then rehired by a different police department in order for him to collect his pension. And, that was it. Right. I don't know if you guys, look that video up. I'm not going to pull it up here because I don't want my stream to get canceled again. Right. But that was, yeah. And that, and that guy was white. Daniel Shaver was a white guy. So there you go. It kind of shows you that, it happens to everybody. I mean, it's happens to black people more often, right? And a much higher frequency, but they're not, we're all in the struggle together. Right. So kind of shows you anybody who runs afoul of the police has that, that danger, that, this could be fucking your life in your hands, right? Anybody who's, if you're in a traffic stop, if you're like, and it doesn't matter if you're a cop, it doesn't matter if you're whoever you are, you make the wrong move and they'll fucking kill you. And it just so happens that, for some reason that seems to happen disproportionately to black people. Who knew? Right. Anyway, there was another example here. Let's see. I wanted to talk about Rayshard Brooks, right? So if you don't know who Rayshard Brooks was, that was another police shooting that happened I think about a week and a half ago. Let me see exactly when it happened. Let's see. Rayshard Brooks. When did this happen? He was basically a restaurant worker in Atlanta, and he actually had a record. Okay, so that's fine. And on June 12th, so about 2 weeks ago, he was asleep in a parking lot, and somebody called the cops because you're not allowed to sleep in a parking lot apparently, right? And he was a little drunk. So the police come up, and this is all on video, right? And, they're questioning him, all this shit. And then, he fails a breathalyzer test. So they're going to take him in. And then he starts, fighting with the cops, and he starts running away. And what happens is he got one of the tasers from the police officer. So I'm not going to pull the video up here because I don't want my stream to get canceled. Sorry. It's I think that's what did it last time, actually. I think we were, my shit just gets like shut off. I don't want that to happen. So anyway, but I'll put a link to it in the bottom once the stream's over with. And this guy, so he struggles with the police once they go to arrest him, and he's running away. And what happens is that he has a taser that he got off of the dude's belt. And so he kind of turns and shoots it like this as he's running. And you see the taser go way off into the sky, right? And the minute he shoots that taser, they shoot him in the back. Just kill him. And he's dead, right? And that one, here's the thing about this, right? Because this also very much polarized and galvanized the protests, So now they're not just talking about, they're actually adding this guy. Now they're protesting for Rayshard Brooks as well, right? So, now I'm not going to sit here and say this one's justified because it's, as far as I'm concerned, not. When you watch the video, the taser it came nowhere close to hitting the officers. It was like way off over there, and they could have just ran this guy down and caught him and all that. But he technically did have a weapon. A taser is a weapon, and he did fire it at the police officers. So, I don't think this time, I think basically what happened is one of the cops got fired pending an investigation. I think he's getting his job back. I think this investigation is going to conclude that these officers did nothing wrong. And, and that's not just my, I mean, okay, it's my opinion. Now when I say that, I'm not supporting what they did. Please understand, right? I'm not trying to justify that these guys shot this guy and say that it's okay or whatever. I'm not going to do that. I'm looking at it from the perspective of, sorry, please excuse the assholes and the loud cars outside. I'm looking at it from the perspective of a jury. If you were a jury and you saw that video, right, you would be forced to conclude that they acted within, appropriately, right? They, everything went well. They didn't just blow him away for no reason, They didn't just shoot him, right, the minute he started running. They waited, they didn't fire until he fired a weapon at them. So apparently they also said some pretty damning things on that video as well. You know, one of the guys says something like, "Oh, I got him," or some shit like that. And then another, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard one of the police officers went up and like stood on the dude's head or something. I don't know. If that's true, then yeah, that justifies a firing as well. Um, I still don't think that it would be justified to have convict them of murder because they didn't murder the dude. You know, I mean, now what does that say though? If they're going to claim that a taser is a weapon, you know, is it a lethal weapon? Right? I think that's one of the questions that's worth talking about. If it's a lethal weapon, why is it okay for the cops to use it on people? But, you know, then why is it also okay to use lethal force in response to that? Right? You know, so does it just mean any weapon? So does that mean they can shoot you if you have a wiffle bat? Can they blow you away? Right? You know, I think those are questions worth asking. You know, was it lethal, you know, was lethal force justified? I think that question is worth asking, right? But I do think that the way that currently the law is set up, that these guys are going to get off. So, you know, and that's kind of crappy, right? But, you know, really what should have happened is that they should have just kept running because the dude missed. And they could have easily have avoided shooting him. So I guess that's another question is like, did they want to? Did they try hard enough? You know, if they would have had the training to understand that this guy was like, you know, not a threat anymore, right? You know, should they be trained to understand that, you know, when lethal force is justified, I guess. You know what I mean? That's really it. You know, they could have avoided this. There was no reason to kill this person, in my opinion. You know. Let's see. Damn it. Hang on a second, people. All right. Still kind of getting used to this. I was wondering why that wasn't applying correctly. There we go. Very, very slowly learning how this works. You know. Let's see, what do we got here? Let's zoom out a little bit, see what we got. I don't know, folks. Everything's fucked up. Looking a little better. I like how this guy kind of turned out. Now we're going to go in afterwards, after I get all of this, all of the shadows and highlights in there. We're going to go in afterwards and blend all of this so that it'll, you know, look all nice and smooth and painter-like. Let's see, what are we at? 141? There was one more thing I wanted to talk about here before we close this all off. We've been talking about all this shit too much, so let's talk about something a little more fun. Right. This is, let's see, Donald Trump's ridiculous, failed Tulsa rally. Yeah, you know, I guess it's fun to poke fun at the failure president now. Because if there's anybody out there who deserves it, it's him. So, this has been all over the news, all over YouTube. I just want to touch on it briefly because I think the shit's hilarious. Basically, what happened was they had the first big rally that Donald Trump was going to have in order to get back to, you know, to start off his campaign in earnest. Right. And it was going to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma, you know, on June 19th, which was a big fucking thing because June 19th was like the date of this massacre that happened way back in the day, where basically there used to be a place, they called it like Black Wall Street in Oklahoma. And, you know, basically what happened was, like, this was like back in the 1890s or some shit, you know, and a bunch of white people were jealous that all of these successful black people were running their businesses and stuff and decided to just run them out of town. And they went in there and massacred all the people and, you know, apparently had a plane that was dropping bombs on people, you know? And here's the thing, right? I had no idea. They don't teach you this in school. And I guess that's one of the things that, you know, people are angry about because we should have known about this, right? Um, have you seen Watchmen on HBO? The first episode of Watchmen on HBO has an opening scene takes place during this massacre. These people are just running away, and there's like a plane and dropping bombs and shit, they're blowing up buildings, and they're just like shooting people and all that. And they basically just fucking torched this whole like city block and just burned all their businesses down because these were white people who didn't like the idea of successful black people in their community. Right. Yeah, see, that's the thing. I think if we would actually learn about this shit in school, you know, maybe people would be less racist nowadays. If we were actually taught the actual real history of the African American experience in our schools here. I don't know. Maybe they got a point, right? Anyway, so that was the big controversy behind that. So they changed the date. They changed it because, that was insensitive and it pissed people off. Who knows if they actually like meant to do that on purpose. They probably did. They probably did mean to do it on purpose like that because, you got to remember people like Stephen Miller are in the Trump campaign, right? So it's probably no fucking, you know, no coincidence that they put it on that day. I am sweating my ass off in here. If I'm looking all sweaty and shit in the cam, it's because it's like fucking 90 degrees in this room. Jesus, it's hot. We're gonna have to cut this short so I don't fucking like die of heat exhaustion. Anyway, but I want to finish this real fast. So they were anticipating 1 million people to come to this, right? Apparently 1 million people made reservations, right? And they built a separate stage, and they thought that they were going to have an overflow crowd, and so they built this outdoor, like they had their indoor stadium and then an outdoor stage where Trump was going to go give a speech to all the people that couldn't get indoors and blah, blah, blah. And 6,200 people showed up. 6,200. So it was a serious flop. Major big time flop. And so what happened? Well, apparently a lot of kids on TikTok decided that it would be funny to troll the president by making reservations to this thing and then not going. And I had no idea that was a thing. I would have totally got on that myself if I would have known they were doing that. I guess I should start using TikTok because I've never turned on TikTok before. I have no idea what the fuck it even is. It's like YouTube videos but 10 seconds long or some shit. I don't know. Anyway, right. So that shit's fucking hilarious. And apparently it was like K-pop fans, fans of K-pop and TikTok users are the ones that did this. And I think that's the funniest shit ever, right? So they like prepared for all these people and then fucking none of them came. And it was like, wow. And apparently there was an ad. So here was one thing I wanted to show you guys here. Let me see. We found this. Let me go to my little drive if I can find it. And let's see. So I don't know if this is real. It might be. But this was on Reddit the other day, right? And apparently in Craigslist there was this ad from the Trump campaign to hire actors to go to this Tulsa rally. So apparently somebody in the campaign, fucking cars, somebody in the campaign knew this shit was happening and knew that the the million person count was BS and said, hey, we need to get some people filling these seats. So flat pay of $250 via check, Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal. Must be enthusiastic in showing your support for Donald Trump. Signs will be provided along with MAGA gear. you know. So now, is this bullshit? I don't know, because this could be fake. I don't know if this is real or not. But you got to remember, though, that Donald Trump's, at the beginning of his campaign, hired actors. Right. So his very first appearance, back when nobody gave a shit about him, back when, like, his very first announcement of his campaign and nobody